What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 162, and this is the peak, the pinnacle of our week-long celebratory podcast to celebrate our 2-year anniversary. And what a greater way to do it than having two of my favourite guests that I've had on the show before. John Scott from Powered 4 TV, Mr. Powered 4 TV, of course, Mr. DNA Pro Wrestling, as I nicknamed him on this week's NXT UK Weekly, and Mr. Mike Angus. So Maddog, great to have you back on the podcast. It's been a few months. I think the last time we spoke was when I interviewed you back in May, I think. So how are you both anyway?
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, John. Do you want to go first? Tell us what you've been up to.
I'm good. He always gives me a lovely introduction. So as this is his the big finale of the anniversary, it's good to be here. I'm looking forward to getting into our list. I'm still slightly confused, but I think I'm going to get there with this, and hopefully a few minor debates, but we'll see. John's got me on here. He knows I'm an old school fan. So I think he's done that deliberately right here. So, it should be good. But yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks, buddies. And looking forward.
And Mike, like I say, it's been a while since we spoke to you. I know we had you on in April to do our WrestleMania 9 look back, which was amazing fun. And then we invited you back for an in-depth interview, and we spoke for nearly an hour and a half, and that was really good fun. But haven't spoke to you for a while on the podcast since. What you've been up to?
Yeah, so I've just had an operation last week, so that was a joy. So I'm just recovering from that at the moment. So, but apart from that, I've kept myself busy. I've been working with the guys from Wrestling Travel, doing some of their podcasts and keeping in touch with everybody. We were hoping to have shows with TNT, Extreme Wrestling in Liverpool, but obviously the lockdown and everything's put a bit of a stop on that. But I just want to say it's an absolute honour to chat with you guys today, and thanks so much for having me on. I've been working hard on my research, and it has been a tough bit of time where I've got to pick a list of 10 guys out of all the Intercontinental champions. So I've been using numerous statistics and a bit of Steiner maths. And I've come up with some criteria of how I've worked out my list. So hopefully we won't have too much debate. But, there's so many choices to go with. And John obviously says that he's a bit of an old school fan. I think I am as well. But, I'm sort of golden age. Yeah. So hopefully there won't be too many disagreements. But we'll have to see.
Well, here we go. And just to kind of fill our listeners in here, this is a special look back, and we're going to try and whittle down the greatest list of Intercontinental champions of all time. And we're looking by the end of this episode to have an ultimate top 10. And we've all got our picks. We've been working hard on who we think are the best, or maybe our favourite Intercontinental champions in history, based on any criteria that you choose, really. Your favourite ones to watch, the greatest matches, the most number of reigns, the most number of days combined. It's entirely up to either me, John Scott, or Maddog on how we came up with our lists. Now, essentially, the rules are we're gonna have 7 wrestlers each that we're gonna kind of list one at a time. So we're gonna go round in rounds. So there'll be 7 rounds, but we're looking to create that ultimate top 10. So when it comes to the 11th pick, that person can then pick off who they consider to be the weakest link of the top 10 as it stands, and then we continue going round. Now, there are some tactics involved, Mike and John. You probably don't want to use your strongest or your biggest names straight away, because potentially they could be picked off. You might want to kind of use them a little bit later on so that they stand a greater chance of staying in the top 10, if that makes sense. And we did something similar early on in the year with me and a couple of the guys from the Ring of Honor review podcast, and I think they're also part of the Broken But Glorious podcasting family, and we did this to create the ultimate list, the greatest Ring of Honor top 10 champions. And so here we go. I thought it'd be good to do a list of Intercontinental champions. So without further ado, I'm going to start proceedings, and then we'll go to Mr. Scott, and then third will be Mr. Angus, and we'll kind of go around in that order. So what it will mean, Mike, is that come the end of it, you'll be the final person to have your pick, to have your final say, to see who ends up on the top 10. So no pressure, but you could make the biggest difference at the end. You can make the biggest difference at the end. I just want to go through some stats and some interesting information. I don't know if you guys have any particular kind of little nuggets of information about the Intercontinental Championship over the years, but Of course, the first ever champion, as we all know, from that tremendous tournament that took place in Rio de Janeiro was Pat Patterson from September 1979. The current one, of course, is Sami Zayn, and he's a two-time champion from September 2020. So 41 years difference from when Pat won it. Wink, wink, Pat, to when Sammy won it a few months ago in September. So 41 years. Pedro Morales has the most amount of combined days as Intercontinental Champion with 619 days, according to Wikipedia, over two separate reigns, and the most amount of Intercontinental title reigns. Mike, I don't know who you believe is the most successful or the wrestler to have the most amount of IC title reigns. Do you know?
Is it Chris Jericho with 9?
Correct, and The Miz is just behind him with 8. So who suspects that The Miz might actually top Chris Jericho in the next few years, with Jericho being with AEW and all that? But so some interesting nuggets of information. Any of you guys got any interesting bits of information you want to share about the IC title from over the years?
Well, I mean, the show that you and I were both at, I don't know if Mike is a third person, but we both know we were there, John, the night at Wembley '92. Obviously watching Davey Boy capture that title. I mean, that was like, for me, I was only a kid at the time. I have to say I was the biggest Bulldog Mark fan ever.
Really?
Totally patriotic. But as I got older, I appreciated Bret a lot more. But at the time, I was all about Davey Boy Smith. The fact that the Intercontinental Championship was like the headline that night as well, instead of the main WWF title, it was like, it just blew me away. And even though I think like everyone was pulling for Bulldog at that time, there was never like that many kind of title changes like abroad, so it was quite a spectacle when it happened, and like just this incredible atmosphere that night. I'm sure you remember parts of it as well.
The atmosphere in Wembley Stadium that night in August 1992 was just mind-blowing. I can still feel it today, to be honest with you, with the roar of the crowd, and when Bulldog got that pin, and the match itself was tremendous. It still gets talked about very fondly today as possibly one of the greatest SummerSlam matches and one of the greatest Intercontinental matches of all time. And we really wanted, as big Bulldog fans, for Bulldog to go onwards and upwards, an upward trajectory in his WWF career, and that never quite happened. And that was probably the pinnacle of his career. But Mike, any kind of fond memories of Intercontinental matches over the years, and any highlights for us?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to see the IC title change hands twice live. Really? So I was at WrestleMania 28 when Cody Rhodes' title reign ended against Big Show, which was for me a bit of an anticlimax to that, what I thought was a great reign. And also I was at the Raw when Jeff Hardy beat John Morrison for the Intercontinental title. So that was back in, must have been around 2006. So yeah, I was there for that one. Facts wise, I've got a couple of little facts.
Go for it.
My favourite one was like the shortest reign was Dean Douglas with 11 minutes.
So Shane.
So classic there. And heaviest ever IC title was obviously the Big Show. So I saw him win the title there. Lightest champion, Rey Mysterio's the lightest they think. So
really.
But I've got loads of useless facts as well. So Ric Flair was the oldest ever champion at 56.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got here just lists of things. So when I was working out my list, I did the most famous people who've held the IC title. So, Stone Cold held it. Triple H has held it, obviously. It's the workhorse title, isn't it? So it
really is. And I think that's... Yeah, I think that's one thing that kind of wrestling fans always hold as a deep tradition with the Intercontinental Championship. It's always been the workhorse title, that kind of stepping stone title to the world title. But if you were the Intercontinental Champion, you were the kind of the wrestler's wrestler, you could say.
Yeah, but tell me, do you both think that that's the case now? I just see it as a
probably
prop.
Not so much nowadays.
Yeah, I don't see it as much. I wish it was there. I know what you're saying, but I kind of think it's gone the last 3 or 4 years, unfortunately. Like, there's so many titles as well. I suppose once you've got like multiple heavyweight champions, like you've got 4 of them, two for obviously the female, 2 male, there's quite a lot there. as it is, and the NXT champion, of course, and then you've got NXT UK champion. So it's like so many belts. I've never known a time of having so many champions at like one time. So it kind of dilutes, unfortunately.
Yeah, and going back to what Mike said, I mean, I think I've seen one more Intercontinental title change when I went to WrestleMania 34, and of course Seth Rollins picked up his first Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 34, and that was 2 years ago, 2018 in New Orleans. So I was quite fortunate to see that. But let's get on with the list. So my first pick to be part of this top 10. Oh, crikey! Let's look down my list and let's pick. Let's pick.
He's tactical already.
Yeah. Okay. This person might not stay the course, but I think they definitely deserve to be mentioned, and they're definitely going to be part of my 7 picks. And I'm going to go with Shelton Benjamin. Now, Shelton Benjamin, he had 3 Intercontinental title reigns, and not many people might kind of remember all of his reigns, or that he was an Intercontinental champion at all. But he's 14th in the all-time list for combined days, and over them 3 reigns he held the title for 354 days, beat the likes of Ric Flair, Jericho, RVD for his championship. So my first pick and the first entrant into the top 10 is going to be Shelton Benjamin. What do you think about my pick then, gents? Any thoughts on Shelton Benjamin? Start with you, John. What do you think of old Shelts?
Yeah, I'm a huge Shelton Benjamin fan, to be fair. So even when he was like in the world's greatest tag team, I was like pulling for him then with Kurt Angle. I wanted to see that guy. Like when I remember his debut on Raw, and I think he'd done like a couple of matches with Triple H straight off the bat. He was really getting over, and then he had like this incredible display in Money in the Bank, the first one at WrestleMania 21. Yeah. Really had like the best spots and moments in it, but like he's always one of those guys that's unfortunately only going to ever be known at that Intercontinental level. Like he never got that next step up, and I'm pretty sure we're never going to see that either. But yeah, he's a fantastic athlete. Like he's really underrated. That classic match, of course, I think WWE shows it enough times, is when the super kick, he flies off that top rope, takes the super kick like crazy. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But yeah, I think he's really underrated personally, and yeah, he's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, and doing some good stuff in the Hurt Business nowadays in modern times. But Mike, any thoughts on Shelton Benjamin?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed his work. I was lucky enough to see him live quite a few times back, sort of in the start of his career, around sort of 2003, 2004, that sort of time when they did like the first Raw in the UK. And yeah, that match with Shawn Michaels really stands out. It was a great one. Interestingly, he was Brock Lesnar's roommate, wasn't he, in Minneapolis when they first came up together? So yeah, he was in my numerous lists that I've got here. Shelton is on one of my lists, but he didn't make my top 10, unfortunately. But yeah, but no, I appreciate his work, and he's doing very well in the Hurt Business at the moment. So yeah,
and deserves a place in our initial list anyway. But Mr. Scott, John Scott, Mr. Powered 4, it's over to you for your first pick.
I think I'm gonna pull the first controversial one out straight from off the bat. Really, let's get the vibe going. I am going with the Honky Tonk Man. Now, people either love him or hate him in this role, because they say, the whole longest reigning champion, which clearly we know kind of he wasn't, as you alluded to earlier, John. But in the WWF eyes and that gimmick at the time, it was all about, the greatest Intercontinental champion of all times. And, I think he's one of these guys. I think because of his ridiculous character in a lot of ways, I think people think, oh, he wasn't a great worker, or he wasn't tremendous at, in his matches. But if you go back and look at his reign, he had some fantastic feuds, and like he was very, very entertaining to watch. I would say a little bit ahead of his time. I think he would have probably been a little bit more appreciated maybe 4 years after that period. I hated the way it all came to an end with the Ultimate Warrior and that, crazily short match. But of course, the reason it made that much impact when Warrior won it is because this guy had been beaten for ages. Like, he'd retained that title all the time. So Honky Tonk Man has to be in there for me. Probably not the greatest wrestler on my list, but he's definitely one of the standouts in that sort of modern, just sort of golden era, if you like, of the WWF at the time, when it was just getting really popular.
Well,
Fulton.
he was on my list. That's one that I can't use, John. But yeah, a good pick. And I think the Honky Tonk Man, although his gimmick was the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, he was such an amazing character with that kind of Elvis impersonator. Loved him in Rhythm and Blues with Greg Valentine and Peggy Sue and Jimmy Hart. But yeah, Honky Tonk Man was on my list, so I can't use him. Damn you, John. The tactics are kicking in already. But Mike, any thoughts on the Honky Tonk Man? I'm sure you've probably met him once or twice at conventions, haven't you?
I certainly have. Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet him at Comic Con in Wales. But yeah, he was a really, really nice guy. Actually, good fun. And I had my son with me that day, and he was, they had good banter and stuff. So yeah, I had Honky in my list as well. I had him at number 8 in my list. So he was in numerous lists here. So he was in my. I had the IC title match at number 7 in my list as most memorable because that match with the Warrior. I remember watching that at SummerSlam '88. It was I probably had it as a VHS at the time rather than watching it live because I was only 3. But it stands out to me. It was 9 seconds title match, and as much as if you didn't know the history of the Honky Tonk Man at the time, to see the Warrior come down and do that, the way they built it was great, and yeah, I enjoyed his work. I had him. We beat during that title reign. He beat Bruno Sammartino, Billy Jack Haynes. He had matches against the Macho Man, and obviously the feud with Brutus Beefcake they were building up. So yeah, I enjoyed him as IC champion, and I think he's one of the most important Intercontinental champions of all time. So yeah, for that reason, I would have put him in the list as well. So yeah, I agree with John on that one.
So, Mr. Angus, who's the first person that you're going to select from your list to appear in the top 10?
Yes, so with my list, I found it was sort of quite golden age heavy. I didn't include. There was a lot of people who were like trailblazers and trendsetters for the Intercontinental Championship who held the belt for like quite long periods of time and things. But sort of the Hulkamania era was the time I was mostly sort of watching back. But as well, modern day champions, there's not many who really stand out to me. But one guy who did was Cody Rhodes. So I'm going to go for Cody Rhodes as my first pick because he brought back the IC title back in 2011.
And the traditional design, wasn't it? Yeah, he brought back
classic design, and it brought it back to and made it. It elevated the title back to being sort of just below main event status, and it really. The feuds he had there. He only beat like Ezekiel Jackson to win it, but he seemed to make it important again, and had a really good run with it. And obviously, then I was there when he lost it against Big Show WrestleMania. So, but yeah, great run, and I think he elevated it back to the level it deserves to be at, really, and was quite important for doing that. So that's why I have put him in my list. He was my 10th pick in my list of most important IC champions. So there you go.
Very good. And of course, Cody Rhodes, he's got his surname back in AEW as of this week, as we saw, if you saw Full Gear last night. But yes, he was on my list, and probably a lot of other people's lists of best or greatest or most important Intercontinental champions of all time. And I think when he lost it to the Big Show, was that when he was wearing the mask? I can't quite remember, but I know he was dashing Cody Rhodes at one point as well. He's gone through various incarnations, but a tremendous wrestler nowadays, and definitely deserves to be on that list. Any thoughts on Cody Rhodes, the Intercontinental Champion, John?
This is, for me, it's like when people say does a champion make a wrestler, or does the wrestler make the championship? I mean, Cody's a classic example of making like the championship valued again, because he got it. Like, he kind of knew, okay, I'm at this level, I'm probably not going to be at the main event just yet, so I'm going to make the best of my opportunity with that belt. And he kind of gave it, like Mike said, some identity again, and put some like magic on it. I love the fact that he went retro with it, with the strap and everything. And that was actually the match you're talking about with the Big Show. That's actually one of my sort of probably last times I actually really remember going into like a big WrestleMania thinking I want to see that match, because they did a really good job at like slating Big Show's record, which was a joke. If you
That's
went
right.
back and looked at all the stupid stuff with Aki Bono and the dancing stuff he'd done, you know,
Because he'd never won a match at WrestleMania until
yeah,
then.
he had a terrible record.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And he'd always kind of showed up and didn't do a lot. So yeah, it was really good, because it's very seldom in WWE that they go back sort of 6 years worth. So whenever they do that, I'm really vested, like as an interested fan again. But normally they don't like to bring up the past too much, and you know, wrestling fans have to have the shortest memories ever, unfortunately. But when they do, it's really good.
So back to me, round 2, my second pick. Oh, crikey. My list is getting shorter by the second. Guys, you've got to stop picking wrestlers that I've picked. Thank you very much. Let's have a look. Okay, this is an interesting one, and I'll be surprised if you've got this person on your list. But he's a 5-time Intercontinental champion, and he's feuded and defeated the likes of Kofi Kingston for the belt, The Miz, Daniel Bryan, and of course I'm on about Wade Barrett, or Bad News Barrett. A 5-time. When you think of Wade Barrett or Bad News Barrett, 5 times Intercontinental champion, that wouldn't automatically be, you wouldn't automatically consider him to have won that championship that many times. But yeah, when I was going through my research, and Wade really stands out. So Wade Barrett is the second on my list. He's going to be number 4 in the charts as it stands at the minute. But Wade Barrett is currently the commentator, one of the announcers on the Black and Gold brand over in Florida, NXT, of course, doing a great job there. I think he's probably retired as a pro wrestler, but yeah, it's a shame that he never quite got the world title that a lot of us thought that he deserved, to be the first English WWF world champion. That never quite happened. Instead, they preferred to stick the IC title on him. But Mike, Wade Barrett, was he on your list? And what do you think about Wade as an IC champion?
Yeah, I thought Wade was a great IC champion. He didn't make it onto my list, unfortunately, though. But I felt like when they first came up from the NXT, and he won it, didn't he? He was great, and they set the Nexus up around him, and they did the whole carving up of the ring and everything. Yeah. And I thought that had so much potential. I was a bit devastated, to say the least, when John Cena sort of finished that little bit of a run at Survivor Series, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he had 5 reigns as IC champion, and he held it with dignity, and did well with it. But unfortunately for me, there's other people sort of who come before him on my list. So yeah, I wouldn't have included him. But good on him.
And Mr. Scott, any thoughts on Wade Barrett?
He's not on my list. He's not even in the top 20, not in the top 25 for me. As much as I do like Barrett, and you're right, he was the best thing in the whole Nexus, especially early on. Like him on the mic, I think he was miles apart from a lot of the actual active guys that have been there for years, quite frankly. He was doing some really good stuff. And I liked Nexus's run. Like I quite enjoyed it, probably more than I did the Shield, which is saying something. But I liked it. It did all combine. I think it was Survivor Series. Am I right in thinking that with John Cena? There was some mad stipulation as well. And a lot of UK fans were thinking, is this going to be it? Is this going to be the guy? And at the time, you wouldn't have been surprised if they did go with him. I'm surprised because when you consider now some of the champions we've had, you look at people like Jinder Mahal, who's come back. Drew just recently, obviously, being our first UK guy. But like nowadays, I kind of like the belts like very actively supplied a little bit more to these guys. I think, again, he's another guilty thing where he's come up too early, because I think like if he'd have come up in the last 2 years, he'd have been that classic villain heel that you run the belt with for like 6 months and then have a huge payoff. So his career could have been so different for me had that night have shaped a little bit differently. But yeah, he doesn't 100%. Make on my Intercontinental list, I'm afraid.
I absolutely loved his Bad News Barrett gimmick, and they kind of cut that short. I felt they could have gone a lot further with that, and that should have been, if you weren't going to win the world title from John Cena in 2010, whenever it was, they should really have pushed him as the Bad News Barrett character up to the top, but they didn't. So John, who's your second pick then?
My second pick. Now I'm going with someone I really admire. I really like this guy. I don't see any fault in this man at all. Is none other than the Perfect himself, Mr. Perfect. Kurt Hennig
Good
is
choice.
going in. Only a two-time champion, I might add, but I think he goes over 400 days, something like that. But he had some incredible matches in that time with a variety of different people. Again, he's one of the few guys you put him in the ring and he just creates magic. I think really, if we're honest, maybe he's, AWA was like the best of him. But when he got to WWF, I think Vince saw him as something completely different. But I kind of always really rated him. I always felt like he was underused towards the end. Like I just wish he'd have got some more main event matches. Maybe not the big title, but just like some big feuds. But I think at the time he was just on the wrong side of being a heel or a face. Unfortunately, that's how it kind of worked. But yeah, I really dug him. He had some great matches with who we brought up earlier, Davey Boy Smith. That was one of the ones I enjoyed. Roddy Piper as well. Obviously Bret in that time, Tito Santana who came back for a second run, and yeah, he's probably the most all-round type wrestler I think on my list in terms of this, and yeah, I had to make sure he gets on there because can't say enough good things about him, Mr. Perfect. Your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, already, the list is shaping up, and there's a few there that could well stay to the end. There are some very, very strong names. I was a huge fan of Mr. Perfect. Loved some of his matches, especially that SummerSlam 91 match against Bret Hart. And even when he returned from his injury, was it about end of 92, 93, he had some great matches. I think he was the one that retired Mr. Ric Flair on a classic Monday Night Raw. I think very early 1994 that sent Ric Flair packing and back to WCW, and that was a great match. But I think around that early 90s, Mr. Perfect or Kurt Hennig peaked, to be honest with you, and I don't think he was ever the same again since. But a great Intercontinental champion. He was certainly on my list. You were quite right that his combined reigns, days went over 400 days. Yeah, he was perfect. He was great in front of the microphone, in front of the camera, the best seller and the best bumper in the business. But his wrestling ability, he was just absolutely perfect. And I know that others have tried to emulate him over the years, but they've never been the same. But Mike, your thoughts on Mr. Perfect?
Yeah, there's not many more wrestlers more complete than Kurt Hennig. He was absolutely perfect wrestler. His promos were great. His work on the mic was great. His matches, one of his matches with Texas Tornado, I think it was SummerSlam 90, was probably Kerry Von Erich's greatest moment in WWF, I'd argue. And, he elevated his opponent to a different level as well by his in-ring work. And, I had him very high on my list. He was like number 3 on my list. And I was lucky enough when I was in Detroit to see him. His family inducted him into the Hall of Fame, so that was a great moment as well to see. And I just think, he's one of the greatest Intercontinental champions of all time. So yeah, I agree again with John. They're gonna have a good one.
He's also just a butt in. He's like what we were talking about earlier about that workhorse. He's one of those guys that I think guys had to go through, and if you could hang with like Kurt Hennig in a match, they'd kind of see you as the next star. I think that's what Kurt was doing at that time as Mr. Perfect. And also for people that haven't seen or maybe heard of Mr. Perfect out there, go and look up those adverts that he'd done, those promos. They were fantastic. I love those. You'd be hard pressed to find those that stuff, especially the NFL catches at the other end, the basketball, the bowling stuff. It's fantastic. I loved all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was a great all-round sports player as well. So I think, like I say, he did have some legitimate skills, whether it be out on the football field or the golf course or wherever. But Mr. Angus, over to you for your second pick.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, it's such a shame Curtis Axel doesn't seem to have given the same sort of rub that his dad had, because I would have liked to have seen more from him, as well. He
was saddled with a very poor name to start off with, so
they paired him up with Heyman for a little while, right?
They did, very briefly.
Potential. It's like it's just unfortunate that more didn't happen with him, but as well, Kurt, he was well respected by all the other athletes in the locker room, especially people like Scott Steiner and Bret Hart and Macho Man, who hold sort of like true athleticism as like the highest at the highest esteem and the highest level. He was a true sportsman, and that's a lot of them appreciate that. So. My next pick, though, I'm gonna let's have a look. This was somebody that was so close over. I was gonna put them in my list or not, but I've got to go with them. I'm gonna put to you that Ultimate Warrior should definitely be in the top 10, and with his 2 reigns totaling 432 days, he had a great feud with Rick Rude. Obviously, beat the Honky Tonk Man for the title, ending that memorable reign at SummerSlam '88. He did raise the belt to new levels because he took on Hulk Hogan as the IC champion at WrestleMania 6. So I'd argue that he, for the IC title, he did a lot to raise its standings and make it, an important belt at that time. And his excitement, his intensity, the face paint, and more importantly, the memories for anybody who's a wrestling fan from the 80s and 90s. As soon as you hear that Ultimate Warrior music, you're shaking that top rope and you're ready to go. And I think the IC title was a big part of his rise to the top. And and for that reason, I've got to include him in my list. So yeah, what do you guys think of that?
Yeah. Big fan of the Ultimate Warrior, and loved his kind of reign as the Intercontinental Champion. Loved his match against Hogan at WrestleMania 6. The thing we spoke about, the workhorse title, and the thing with the Ultimate Warrior, I think, is more gimmick and kind of more 2 or 3 moves as opposed to actually being the workhorse, like you would say with a Mr. Perfect or a Cody Rhodes or a Bret Hart, for example, or a Shawn Michaels. Can fully understand why you've got him in your list because of that kind of prestige and that kind of big character. But John, Ultimate Warrior, is he on your? Was he on your list?
Of WrestleMania 6, that intro from Vince McMahon's voice going off in my head. I'm having flashbacks already. That crazy that crazy video that came on where it's something like the galaxies will collide, and then you see this crazy graphic going on.
Those were the best introductions.
Oh mate, Vince must have had a sore voice after all them, I tell you. But Warrior didn't make my list, but Mike saying that, it's kind of like made me feel a little bit differently about it, because again, it does put it in perspective. He did showcase the Intercontinental belt on the biggest stage, arguably against the biggest star of all times in Hulk Hogan, and I kind of wish they would do more of that with that Intercontinental belt. I think that's probably the only way to ever get it established again, is to have a guy who's going to roll into WrestleMania, fight for the big title, but still having the Intercontinental Championship. Nowadays, it seems like it's custom to give up that title and you have to go on to the other one for some reason. Like, you can't seem to have both. But I think I actually like the fact that it was the Intercontinental Champion against the WWF Champion, and it was title for title, so it wasn't just
special.
About the one. Yeah, so I do think he showcased it. Very minimal moments for me with Warrior, but there isn't like a great traditional match of the sense of the word that I enjoyed. However, he definitely did elevate it to another level. Like that was its peak probably in terms of showcasing it at like a big stage like that. So yeah, I'll give it to him there, but he's not on my list. I'll say that much.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Warrior feud with Rick Rude over the Intercontinental Championship as well back in 88 or 89? And I know that Rick Rude kind of brought out the best in the Ultimate Warrior, especially during that feud between the two of them. So that's one thing that will definitely last in my memory as far as Warrior being the Intercontinental Champion, or being in and around the championship anyway. But it's on to my third pick. So we're into round 3. Crikey, my list is whittling down with you two picking them off already. Let's have a look. Okay, this is an interesting one. I know that you two are both old school fans. Myself, not so much, to be fair, but I'm going to go with one of the first champions. He didn't win some fictional tournament in Rio de Janeiro. I'm talking about Pedro Morales. So the reason why he's up there is because I think he's the He is the guy with the most amount of combined days as Intercontinental Champion of all time. He had 2 reigns that lasted a combined 619 days by my reckoning. He beat Ken Patera for the title in December 1980, lost it to Don Morocco 7 months later, but won it back from Don Morocco 5 months after that in November 81, and then kept it from November 81 through to January 1983, and then lost it again to Don Morocco. So 619 days. Pedro Morales. I don't know too much about the guy, but his stats speak for itself. And I think he was during this era where there was kind of lots of big, muscular, powerful guys, powerful brawlers, and like I say, for him to hold on to the belt for that length of time over just 2 singular reigns was pretty special. So Pedro Morales is going on my list, guys. Mike, any thoughts on Pedro?
Yeah, Pedro, he was top of my sort of trailblazing, trend-setting list, and obviously with the longest reign of all time, he was very close to making my top 10. But I just thought that at the time when he held it, it was sort of more sort of territory sort of time, and it was WWF was only just starting to really take off. Then it was quite sort of early, and I thought sort of like around WrestleMania 3 and onwards from there was when it really took off mainstream with the with the satellite TV and everything. And I feel like Pedro was just a little bit before that, and for that reason, that's why I left that sort of a group of great wrestlers. They set up everything for people who work after them, but he didn't make my list just because for that reason. So I've watched a few of his matches and everything, and looked back on his history, and he was a great wrestler, but just for that reason, he didn't quite make my list. What about you, John?
Yeah, I like Morales. We did something on like my old podcast where we'd go back and watch these really old classic bouts, ranging all the way back to the 50s, and he came up quite a bit. I mean, he was again, he's one of these guys like had he have been a little bit more showcased better, he'd probably be more remembered. He'd have probably got to that bigger status, but. He was a fantastic worker. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I'd definitely say to anybody, especially like newer wrestlers today, like go and watch. I mean, what was old then becomes new again, and he done some quite good stuff. Like he had a very good pace. I'll give him that. Like to his matches, he knew how to work that live crowd and that audience, and that's what I appreciate about him. As an Intercontinental Champion, he was on my list. So, Johners, I'm not happy there too much, but I've got a few more to pull out from that sort of time period. That's fine, but he was definitely up there for me. So I do rate him and appreciate him quite a bit.
Well, who's your third pick then, buddy?
I've gone with a man you just mentioned actually in one of his feuds was Ken Patera. He for me. I really like this guy. He was kind of like Kurt Angle before Kurt Angle came along. That was the kind of character almost. He was a really dastardly heel as well back then. And this is a time when heels were kind of like really hated people. I mean, like fans, they didn't just go there. It wasn't cool to just get behind the heels back then. This was like, no, I don't like this guy, and he's going to shove. But what I liked about him is he's kind of heel stuff was because he was better than half the guys there that he was going to get in the ring with, and it was kind of that was the style. He only had 1 reign as the champion, not incredibly long, but second ever. Should put that one out there. For me, I just appreciate his work as kind of like somebody who I think, for a character point of view, really added something to that belt and sort of give it a little bit more magic behind it, especially at that time in that setting. It wasn't overly big to have these ginormous characters, but when you did get a couple of them, they really did well. So this guy for me, I put him in there all day long.
Good choice, good pick.
Your thoughts,
Mike? Any thoughts on Ken Patera?
Yeah, he was a star back in the day, but unfortunately, he didn't make my list. He was on with the list with the likes of Pat Patterson and Greg Valentine, them guys who are all great Intercontinental champions, but it was just sort of a little bit before my watching. So for that reason, I've gone for other people who are a bit more, a little bit later on. But I appreciate his talent, obviously.
And Mike, who's your third pick?
My third pick, then, I would have to say at this stage, Razor Ramon.
Oh, good pick.
Yeah, so he held the belt 4 times for a total of around 438 days. So the sixth of all time. Through sort of 94, 95, he traded the belt with HBK, Diesel, Jeff Jarrett. So he was a big part of the Intercontinental title scene then. He won the tournament with which was when Shawn vacated the title, and he had that great match on Raw with Rick the Model Martel, which is a fond memory, that one, with the winning that one, and and obviously then went on to have the ladder match with Shawn at WrestleMania 10 when Shawn came back for the Intercontinental title. You could say that was one of the biggest showcases as well of the IC title, and in the ladder match, I remember watching that live. It was probably one of the first WrestleManias I watched live, and that was the reason I was tuning into that show, to watch that match and see what those guys did, and they didn't disappoint at the time. It was mind blowing to see that. I hadn't seen anything like it before, and it still stands the test of time as a great match. With the guys, especially Shawn and Razor, obviously both working with and against the ladder.
Yeah, and that match was equalled about a year and a half later, Mike, when they had a rematch for the IC title at SummerSlam '95, and that was a ladder match as well, wasn't it? And two classic matches, kind of within a year or so of each other. Phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. And so obviously Razor won the first one, Shawn won the second one, but for that reason, Razor Ramon has got to go on my list of Intercontinental champions. So yeah, good one.
I mean, I must admit, when I was a teenage Johners, Razor Ramon was one of my favourites, to be honest with you. Just loved the look, loved the style, the charisma, the machismo, Mike, the machismo that he was oozing. Like, I would have loved to have seen him as a WWF World Champion. I know he had his shots against Bret Hart when Bret was the champion back in '93, I think. I remember they fought at Royal Rumble '93 for the title. But and Razor Ramon, that was one of the reasons why he left the WWF, because he kept being saddled with the IC title. He wanted to be pushed as a main event guy, as a world title guy, and Vince never saw him as the world title guy. And then, of course, he kind of went and became one of the insiders, or was it the outsiders, the NWO? Yeah, one of those over in WCW. Yeah, and of course, Scott Hall, a tremendous talent, but he has had his demons over the years. But big fan of Razor Ramon over here. What about yourself, John Scott?
Yeah, I can't get the image out of my head. Teenage Johners that you mentioned earlier. I think you need a T-shirt there. We could see you cheering for. I'm
Pro Wrestling Tees tomorrow.
Yeah, that's it. I'll put that up now. That'll be on the anniversary special. 10%, please, John. Please, 10%. No, Razor Ramon. For me, like, this is a guy who, you said Vince didn't see that like next level in him. I don't know what he couldn't see that I was in, because I thought at the time he was really popular with the fans, and I could have easily seen him as the WWF champion. Quite frankly, I don't think it would have been unbelievable at that time. And he was actually, when that belt was around and he had it, that was when the Intercontinental belt used to get brought into the sort of WWF title picture quite a bit. They used to do a lot of tag matches with him and Diesel, sometimes him and Shawn, and do all sorts of crazy things at like In Your Houses when it first came about and stuff like that. And yeah, he had some great matches, like even with guys like Jeff Jarrett. I remember a really good match between them at the time. And I love his character. The whole hey, yo. It's just fantastic. Like, but him and Shawn, you're not going to beat that in terms of like those kind of matches. I mean, they were really trailblazing type things that we still talk about now. And WrestleMania 10, although they weren't the headline, that was like arguably what a lot of people were talking about after the show. It was like this crazy ladder match, and of course, he ended up winning that. A lot of people always think Shawn was the guy that night, but no, it was Razor, who obviously got the fake one and his own one back.
Good point.
I quite like it. He was definitely in my top 10 there. So yep.
Okay, back to me for my fourth pick. We're certainly rattling through these picks, but oh wow. Crikey, my list is getting shorter. Okay, this is an interesting pick. It wouldn't be a natural choice for many people, but he's actually gone on to bigger and better things since being an Intercontinental champion. He has won the US title, tag team title holder many times, and a former WWE champion. And I'm talking about Kofi Kingston. So a four-time former Intercontinental champion, combined number of days 266. Feuded with the likes of Dolph Ziggler over the title, Wade Barrett, Chris Jericho, and many more over the IC title. We know him better nowadays as 1/3 or 1/2 possibly of the New Day, now that they've split the New Day up. But we all remember very fondly Kofi winning the world title, the WWF title over Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania a couple of years back. But a lot of people forget that he's a former four-time Intercontinental champion, kind of looking at the kind of early 2010s, but had some great matches, and that's kind of where he really started to make his name, winning the IC bout. But John, Kofi Kingston, did he make it onto your list?
He didn't make it on my list, not even in the top 20. I don't know. I do like Kofi, but like when he had those belts, I think after the first one, the first reign, I always just found him not that appealing to me to watch. I remember he almost got close where he did some stuff with Randy the first time round, and that was going to kind of make or break him at the back end of 1 year. But yeah, he. For me, with that title, it never really brought me in. I probably wasn't watching the product as much either, to be quite honest with you. But I never really saw that much in Kofi Kingston as the title, I'm afraid. So yeah, he's not really anywhere near my top 25, I'd say. But he's a fantastic. Obviously, he's got his Just Rewards very recently. He's an outstanding performer, as we know, and it just goes to show you when WWE can be bothered. These guys can be big stars. But I don't know what you think about him currently at the moment, like his position, but nonetheless, he's finally did get the big one. But for me, he doesn't go on anywhere near my top list.
Mike, Kofi Kingston, was he on your list?
He was in the top 30.
Well, that's something, I suppose.
So I always enjoyed his work as IC champion, and I'm glad he got to the level he did, where winning the belt and everything. The main one. But yeah, unfortunately for Intercontinental titles, he didn't stand out enough compared to other people, unfortunately. So that's why he wasn't in my sort of top 10. So.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if Kofi is kind of picked off fairly soon as we start eliminating wrestlers. But I'm leaving my heavy hitters till later on, so I'm just kind of lulling you into a false sense of security. That's what it is. It's all about tactics. So we've got our initial 10 then, guys. So let me just read our kind of top 10 as it stands at the minute. We've got to shout it. This is in no particular order, but just the order that we kind of announced them in: Shelton Benjamin, Honky Tonk Man, Cody Rhodes, Wade Barrett, Mr. Perfect, The Ultimate Warrior, Pedro Morales, Ken Patera, Razor Ramon, and Kofi Kingston. So I think we're up to vote number 11. So John Scott, you got the 11th vote, round number 4 for yourself. And who would you like to take off the top 10 then?
Oh, well, I think the guy we just mentioned is going off, Kofi Kingston.
Poor Kofi. He's barely been there 2 minutes, poor guy. Okay.
It makes it simple. It made it really simple for me when you said him, because I was looking at that list thinking, it's going to be a few hard ones there. But Kofi's my man.
And who are you replacing him with?
Right, so I'm putting in, now this one again is a little bit suspect. He's an old school by definite means, but the magnificent one, Don Morocco, is going in for me. Don Morocco, I think he was a 2-time champion. He had the belt for a long old time, I think like over 540 odd days, or had that infamous steel cage match, some great bouts that he had in his time. And he looked, for me, like when I was a kid and I used to go back and watch like sort of wrestling and stuff, like he looked the part. When I saw him, I thought, blimey, there's a guy who looks like you wouldn't want to mess with. And he really presented himself in like a champion's way, like he came across like somebody who was legitimate. I always was just fascinated by him. We don't hear too much about him for one reason or another, but I think with that belt, the stuff with Jimmy Snooker and those times, he was one of the sort of pioneers, and I really enjoyed him. We probably didn't get to see the best of him like those early WWF days. I think that was sort of coming more towards his end, unfortunately. Although they did keep using him, like Royal Rumbles come around, let's get Don Morocco in, let's get this poor guy back. But yeah, he definitely, for me as an Intercontinental, I think he had it for a long old time. 2-time champion, as I say. So for me, he has to go in, just from my personal sort of watching and viewing habits back then.
Mike, you said at the beginning of the podcast that you're fairly old school. Was Don Morocco on your list? Any memories of Don Morocco? Don the Rock Morocco, the first Rock.
The original Rock. Yeah, Don was close to making my top 10, but he just missed out. He was right on the cusp of getting in there, but he didn't quite make my top 10, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I can't comment on Don because I don't know too much about him, but there we go. Not without quickly checking his profile on Wikipedia, which I'm not going to do. But instead, I'm going to throw to Mike Angus for your fourth pick. But first of all, before you tell us who your pick is, looking at the top 10, anybody you want to kind of take off that you think is a bit of a weak link already?
Yeah, I think unfortunately for me, I think Shelton Benjamin just misses out on my top 10. So yeah, I'd have to take Shelton out. Great athletics
aren't doing very well at the minute.
Great. Sorry,
He's
John.
ganged up on his anniversary.
Don't worry, I've got some big names in the bag. Don't worry.
That's it. Yeah, but Shelton, great worker, but unfortunately, there's other people who have just pipped him in the IC title run. And one that I'm going to add in that is not necessarily someone I've been a huge fan of, but you just can't deny that the guy has done great with the IC champion. So he was 7th in my list. So I'm going to say The Miz, which is possibly controversial, but he's had 8 reigns as IC champion, totaling 597 days, which is the second longest in history. He made the title a big thing again. And the guy, as much as you might not like him, he radiates charisma and personality. He did great with the IC title, and he's another one who's raised it to that next level. He feuded with the Shield, Reigns and Rollins. Obviously, John, as you saw him, he lost to Rollins, didn't he, at WrestleMania 34? That was The Miz, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He beat Ziggler. He beat Wade Barrett. He had a feud with Christian, beat Christian. And, so The Miz has done a lot for the IC championship. And the most important thing that I think about The Miz carrying it is that that The Miz is the IC champion when he's the IC champion, which, over the last few years has not been as predominant. But when he's got that title, he's always got it with him. He always mentions it. And it's, as well as him raising the championship to a new level, it's raised him to a new level as well. And, although I've never been a huge fan of him, I think what he's done with the IC title and, what he's done in his career, he's, over the last sort of 10 years, he's really come to the forefront as one of the, mainstays of WWE. So, you can't deny the guy. So, yeah, I'm going to put The Miz in there. So.
Yeah, and I'll echo your thoughts there, Mike. I've never really been the biggest fan of The Miz, but you've got to respect what he's done. 8 title reigns, nearly 600 combined days. I think it was around 2016, 2017 when he had a feud with the likes of Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins for the title. And some great matches. And like I say, he did help to make the Intercontinental title feel important again when he holds it. And he's one of them champions that he'll never be the workhorse, but he always puts a lot of effort into everything he does, whether it's his personality, whether it's in the ring. He'll never be, the next Zack Sabre Jr. or Daniel Bryan or anything like that, but he does put 110% effort into everything he does. And you can't take it away from him. I think he has been definitely one of the best Intercontinental champions of all time. And of course, remember, he beat Zack Ryder one day after Zack won that match in what was it, WrestleMania 32, 100,000 people. He wins it in that ladder match, and the following day, The Miz is there to beat him on a one-day reign. So, but there we go. Yeah, John, your thoughts on The Miz as an Intercontinental champion? Where does he kind of rank in your memories and lists?
I've never really been a huge fan of the Miz, like in ring, but I really like the guy outside the ring. I think he's
Yeah.
really professional and he's like a top company guy. And considering what happened, I think what WrestleMania was it 29 or 20? What was the one that he had and with The Rock? 27, sorry.
27, yeah.
And considering most guys would have come off that and you'd have probably not seen him again after a couple of years. They'd have been phased out. But he's stuck around for so long, and I think that's a testament to him because he's always giving it his all. No matter what they give him all these different tag team partners as well. He always makes the best of the scenario he's given. And in terms of his Intercontinental runs, like, I think he's definitely one of those guys we'll always look back and say he was an Intercontinental guy. There's no doubt about it. There have been some times where I've been when they paired him up with Ric Flair and stuff like that. I've been thinking, what are they doing? But yeah, he's had such a mixed bag sort of career, but you can't deny he is a top professional. He's always there for them in terms of like doing their PR, the charity stuff. I hear he's one of the guys that always is totally a professional for doing that kind of stuff. So I think it does go to show that he's probably one of their sort of top guys now for that. And you never know if the opportunity comes around and there's a gap or anything like that, he would be somebody they'd feel comfortable with because they've known him for so long. So it would be an easy transition. I'd love to see him have another go, by the way, as a heel again and, make it a little bit differently. Maybe not have the Rock as involved as last time or another huge superstar from the outside, but maybe a little bit more about him. But he's just his in-ring stuff's never really gone for me, but I'm a fan of his character and whatnot.
Yeah, and of course he's holding the Money in the Bank briefcase at the minute, so you never know. He could be a two-time WWF or Universal Champion fairly soon. I think it's back to me, isn't it? So my fifth pick, we're certainly rattling through them. My list is getting shorter and shorter. I might have to check out the internet again for some more names if I run out of names. But let's have a look. Okay, let's go with somebody fairly current then, and I say current because he was involved in the AEW pay-per-view Full Gear last night, and I'm going to go with a three-time Intercontinental Champion, 245 days combined, feuded with the likes of Kevin Owens over the title, The Miz over the championship, Seth Rollins as well, and I'm talking about Dean Ambrose, aka / John Moxley. So Dean Ambrose, I've been a bigger fan of his as John Moxley back in AEW, bigger presence, bigger character, more freedom to do what he wants to do. He always complained on all his podcasts he was shackled while he was in WWE, but he had a lot of success. He was a US champion, tag team champion, world champion, and a three-time Intercontinental champion. I think he definitely is worthy of being mentioned in our top 10, at least for now, until somebody eliminates him. But I'm going with Dean Ambrose, my three-time Intercontinental champion, and he's going to be taking, or it's my opportunity to take somebody off the list. Mike, I'm afraid I've got to get rid of Warrior, so he's going to be replaced by Dean Ambrose. I don't see Ultimate Warrior. Oh, he only had 3 moves, didn't he? How could he be a champion of the workhorse title with 3 moves? It was probably 2.5 moves more than anything. But I'm afraid, Mike, I've got to get rid of Warrior, and he's going to be replaced by Dean Ambrose. But any thoughts on my pick of Mr. Ambrose / Mr. Moxley as my fifth pick?
Awful, actually. I think that's terrible. I can't stand Dean Ambrose. I never liked his character at all in WWE. I like John Moxley. I love John Moxley, but like Dean Ambrose, to me, the lunatic, the T-shirt he used to wear just to make sure we all know that he's a lunatic. He'd come out in merch. That stuff when he was, running around backstage, or he turned up. What was that time they didn't have a Raw because they were all like shut out because of the snow, and they did like this, like they made this huge song and dance about Dean Ambrose for the day because he's a bit dodgy because he goes through some underground trains about paying and stuff like this. It was too over the top. And the match
the lunatic fringe.
Oh, for me, the combination with Brock Lesnar at a WrestleMania, I just thought it was the most diabolical match I'd ever seen. I really didn't enjoy it. I never saw him as a top guy in what he wore for some reason. Like, I don't know what it is, but his attire, the vest, the jeans, I'd never done it for me. And the most generic music ever. in my opinion. I was never a Dean Ambrose fan, so this is where I'm going with this one, I'm sure. But I don't know how you could have put him on there, quite frankly. So no,
my list is awesome. What are you on about? Mike, was you a fan of Dean Ambrose?
I was always a fan of the potential character and his moves. I enjoyed a lot of his matches, but I was never ever happy with how he was actually booked. So I always wanted something else from him. And luckily, with Jon Moxley now when he's at AEW, he seems to be doing a lot more, and I'm happy to see it. So I unfortunately I had all three of the Shield were quite far down on my list. And Moxley was actually the third out of the three of them. So, I wouldn't have picked Moxley, unfortunately, Ambrose for this one. But yeah.
See, what I'm trying to do here, guys.
Opinions.
What I'm trying to do here, guys, is pick people that you wouldn't kind of necessarily anticipate, the least predictable wrestlers, and later on, I'm going to shock you all with.
There's a master plan.
Shockmaster style.
I have a quick question on the rules. Are we allowed to put guys back in, or is that it once they're gone?
That's it. Once they're gone.
All right. Yeah. So once they're deleted, as Matt Hardy says, they are delete.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Oh, nightmare.
Into the deleted universe.
All right.
So we're on to John Scott, Mr. Powered 4. Who is your fifth pick?
Well, I can tell you I'm getting rid of.
Oh,
The bloke just put in Dean Ambrose. He's going off it. He's not in that list. So
fair enough.
Scrub him off, please.
Fair enough.
I can't even stand to see his name there, quite frankly, at the moment, in fear that somebody else might not knock him off. So now I'm going to put in a guy who, obviously, I was a huge, as probably many people know, Bret fan, but I'm going to put in a guy that sort of rivaled him for a long time, none other than Shawn Michaels, HBK himself. I'm putting in a big hitter right now. Obviously, 3 times Intercontinental champion, had quite a decent length of days in terms of reign. And, as Mike alluded to with his Razor Ramon input, he was around in that time for that belt. And I think, he, much like Razor, he was one of the guys that was putting the Intercontinental Championship almost on a higher level than the title at the time, because those matches were a little bit more exciting. I think fans, when they left, they weren't talking about sometimes the main event, especially towards the end. The reigns with Lex Luger when they tried all that, and Yokozuna for some time. The matches people were talking about was Shawn Michaels, Razor. His clique, obviously, politics played a big part, but you can't fault him. He was having some amazing matches. Obviously, we spoke about the whole forfeit thing, and he had his own title come back. But for me, and I know he said it many a times where he thought that was going to be the level for him. He thought he was only going to be an Intercontinental champion, but obviously, he finally did get there. But yeah, he's one of the guys you've got to say when you talk about workhorses as well, and just some of the stuff he was doing. I think his reign certainly made Vince take another look at him. Why he didn't look at Razor in that way, I don't know, but Shawn definitely came off well, and you could tell this is a guy, come out of tag team wrestling and made the most of those opportunities with the belt. And again, classic example of guy making the belt rather than the belt making him. So yeah, he definitely is in there. One of my big hitters, Shawn Michaels.
Good pick. I always liked Shawn Michaels as the Intercontinental champion. I think he won his first championship by defeating Davey Boy Smith not long after Davey Boy won the IC title at Wembley, didn't he? Back in around about October, November 92. I think it was some pay-per-view or maybe a Saturday night's main event or something. I do remember that very, very vividly. But how many times did Shawn win the championship, John? Do you remember?
It was 3 times, I believe. That's my facts are right.
Quite impressive. But we all know that Shawn, soon after became a world champion and is fondly remembered as one of the greatest all-round wrestlers of all time. We talk about, the Mr. Perfect to this world. Shawn Michaels is definitely in that same league as well as an all-rounder in front of the camera, microphone, in that ring. He could do pretty much everything, and definitely worthy of being on that list. And definitely worthy of knocking Dean Ambrose off the list as well. So well done there, buddy. But Shawn Michaels, we're all big fans of Shawn Michaels. There's no disputing his ability. But as an Intercontinental champion, did he do it for you?
Yeah, definitely. I loved his time as Intercontinental champion. When he beat British Bulldog, obviously with it was like a reversal of a superplex, wasn't it? Off the top rope, he did, which was I remember that stands out. And I really enjoyed his work with Marty Jannetty over the Intercontinental title actually, and it was. I hardly ever see that match pop up now, but I always remember the bit where Jannetty's in the ring and he's got the Intercontinental title and Sean's in the aisle waiting to go back and get it. And Marty Jannetty's calling him a chicken, and then anytime Sean gets near the ring, Marty nips up and won't let him get back in the ring to get his belt. I just that really stands out to me, and I thought Sean was very high on my list. He was I would have put him about fourth, and the reason for that is just he was probably one of the most important and memorable IC champions of all time. So the only detracting factor for Shawn Michaels for me was the fact that he vacated the title twice, as far as I remember. Once due to like injury, and another because of politics, as far as I've heard. So I can't really go into that because it's only hearsay, but something to do with Dean Douglas possibly.
Yeah.
But but Sean very high on my list as well. Yeah, you can't deny HBK, one of the greatest, most famous, and most memorable IC champions. So yeah.
So go on, John.
No, I was just about to agree with you, and all those things. Yeah, the Marty Jannetty stuff was really good. I forgot to mention that, but that really took that to another level. Obviously, poor old Marty did not get those go the same way, but Marty Jannetty got the second wind. What was it? The New Rockers with Al Snow, Leif Cassidy.
Yeah.
Not
quite the same.
That feud between Marty and Sean back in, was it 92/93? I was really expecting big things from that feud, and it never materialised. I know they had a match for the IC title. Was it Royal Rumble 93? But a lot of people thought that should have been a big WrestleMania blow-off match after being put through the barbershop window. And Marty Jannetty, unfortunately, was his own worst enemy. He was in and out of the company like a yo-yo through the 90s, and because of his reputation, was never given a run with the IC title or a big main event level feud with Shawn Michaels again after that. But Mike, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. This is your fourth pick, my friend. So sorry, Mike, your fifth pick. My apologies. First of all, who are you taking off of the top 10 as it stands?
So at the moment, out of the top 10, I would have to take out Ken Patera, unfortunately, because Ken just didn't make my top 10. Sorry, John, but Ken was not in my top 10. I'm going to just throw in a bit of a wild card here for you guys and say that with 5 IC title runs totaling 171 days, what do you guys think of Edge as an Intercontinental champion? Because I think it was quite a big part in his career to build him up to that next level. And obviously matches he had with like Christian and a couple of great IC title runs. It really built him up to get him towards that level where he was where he became the rated R superstar. And I think without the IC title runs, he's he wouldn't get them opportunities. So so I'm going to say Edge at that stage and see what you guys think about that.
Great shout, really great shout, and he wasn't on my list, but I really wish I had put him on my list, to be honest with you. Like I say, like a lot of these champions, you kind of forget how many times they actually won the championship, and for Edge to have won it 5 times is a fantastic accomplishment. And of course, I think he was kind of always in that Intercontinental title picture throughout the early to mid 2000s, and never really considered kind of that big main event world title contender until maybe the late 2000s. He kind of certainly made that transition in the end. But as Intercontinental champion, great shout, Mike. Really, really good shout, and definitely deserves to be in the top 10, certainly as it stands at the minute. But John?
I dig Edge, but I don't dig him from that era. I really couldn't stand him as the baby. The Edgehead stuff. You remember he was doing that for a time, and never gonna stop me. That bloody music, I couldn't stand that one. But I loved him as a heel. I thought he was like him and Christian were just brilliant. But yeah, I think around. I mean, I can't even remember. Do you know he won like the first? I'm sure I remember his first. Was it Jeff Jarrett? Was the first?
Jeff Jarrett for like
I remember watching that show, and I was like, oh, they might, he could be the next guy. He seemed to like stick around in that, that bracket for a long time, where in the end I actually thought he was never going to get to the next level, and it took obviously the Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 21 and the whole thing with Lita taking on quite a little bit of steam because there was some truth in it, and God knows what else they were doing with that angle, and it really took him, elevated him to the next level. But I think it was more for the Money in the Bank than it was for the Intercontinental Championship, in my opinion. But he did have some good reigns. I just never really dug him. I know that they were really trying to push him. I think it was 2002 where they stuck Hulk Hogan with him because they said he was in the crowd. Obviously, he'd watched the Ultimate Warrior match we spoke about earlier. He was in the crowd, and he kind of was like, under his under his management at the time, and I couldn't stand it. I just thought it was terrible. So yeah, I wasn't a huge Edge fan in the Intercontinental days, but I got really big on him when he was the sort of rated R and all those kind of days, and obviously, tremendous success since.
Definitely. So we've each done 5 picks. We've gone around 5 times. Let's just have a reminder of where we are with the top 10, because we've only got 2 picks left. So it's starting to get a bit more crucial as to whether you want to have your picks there left standing come the end of this show. So we've got The Miz, who was Mike's pick, Honky Tonk Man, John's, Cody Rhodes, another one of Mike's, Wade Barrett from myself, Mr. Perfect, another one of John Scott's, Shawn Michaels as well. Pedro Morales was one of mine. Edge, Razor Ramon, and Don Morocco. So quite a solid list there. Definitely a solid list. If we were to stop now, that would be a pretty awesome final top 10 of Intercontinental Champions. But we got to round 6 to start now. So it's getting down to the nitty gritty. So I've got to start pulling out some heavy hitters because all of mine have been eliminated quite quickly, haven't they? Okay. This one is sure to be left standing when all said and done at the end of this show. And I'm going to go for 2-time champion, 290 days. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. The excellent of execution, Bret Hart. So how's about that? And of course, he won his first Intercontinental Champion, his first singles title in WWF as late as 1991, and against Mr. Perfect. And that was a hell of a match. Still one of the greatest Intercontinental Championship matches of all time. One of Bret and Kurt's greatest matches, I'm sure. But that was a great match, and that was his first singles title. Typically always a tag team wrestler, before that typically a tag team champion with the Hart Foundation, and then he lost the title. The title kind of bounced around a little bit, and then in another classic match he won it back again for his second reign against Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8. So that's another really great Intercontinental title match. Both of them 2 matches really stand out as 2 of my favorite matches of all time, let alone them being Bret Hart matches, all for the Intercontinental title. And of course, a third match you can add to that was a match that he lost, and we've mentioned it a few times, against Davey Boy Smith at Wembley Stadium. So them trio of matches all within a 12-month period is mind-blowing when you think about it, all from one guy. And I don't think Bret Hart really ever had a bad match, if you are honest with yourself. But Bret Hart definitely deserves to be in the top 10, and more importantly, who is he going to be eliminating? I said earlier that I don't really know too much about this individual, so it's probably my naivety, and I apologise to John, but Don Morocco is off the top 10.
Getting me back now.
And he's going to be replaced by Bret the Hitman Hart. So there we go. And I know you two are both big fans of Bret Hart, but give us your thoughts on his Intercontinental title reigns first, Mike.
Yeah, Bret was my number 1 on my list, actually. After working out all my different factors from most famous, IT title matches, longest reigning, most important, most memorable, out of all those sort of things, putting them into into the Steiner maths, Bret Hart came out with the best IC title in my opinion, the best holder of that. He was the excellence of execution at that time. It was the defining moments of his career, beating Mr. Perfect, having his family there at SummerSlam. Yeah. It solidified him literally as a main event star. Just the fact that he had the SummerSlam 92 match as well with Bulldog as the main event on the show. He was the epitome of a workhorse. Great technical wrestler. You know, it showed that he was no longer a tag team wrestler winning that title, and he carried it in such a way that it elevated the title, and it elevated him especially, and also all of his opponents he came into contact with, whether it be the match with the Mountie, where the Mountie won it, you know, and Bret had the flu or whatever, and then the match with Piper, it gave Roddy a chance to hold the belt, going into WrestleMania 8. That match was a masterpiece, as was the SummerSlam 92 match. So, you know, Bret, just for me at that stage, was my absolute favorite, and thoroughly deserves to definitely be on the list. So yeah, definitely big shout there, the Hitman. Excellence of execution, good call, Jonas.
John Scott's Bret Hart, was he on your
Finally,
list?
we agree. Finally,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I back up everything you just said. Really, you can't say any more than that. I mean, he's in the Continental reign. It didn't matter who he faced. You could have some really rubbish guys that were in the ring with him, but he'd still make something out of it every night. Really, that he had that belt, and I think that's what really interested Vince, going from a huge Hulk Hogan household name to somebody that fans a little bit. I suppose the only way you can really sort of say parallel it to is in the modern era is like someone like Daniel Bryan, who fans just feel like there's more of a connection with that guy because he's kind of a quote unquote normal. And I think Bret had that great quality. He wasn't tremendous on the mic, but he had like a likability about him, and that's something you can't really get with anybody. Like, you can look $1,000,000, but like Lex Luger for a long old time, but it didn't work for him. But you get someone like Bret come along, and he was just it was someone really for the fans, especially I think in those early days in the Intercontinental time. He was starting to build that tremendous international audience that he'd end up getting as well, especially in Europe and the UK, and even other places. He was one of the first guys I'd say worldwide was beginning to really draw people in, like a new audience, or a more wrestling based audience. Gone are the days of Hulk Hogan. So he was very, very important. Definitely was he was a number one in my list. So yeah, definitely a good shout for me.
Awesome. And who is your number 6 pick then, and who are you knocking off the chart?
This is going to be a tough one now, I tell you, because I've got to be careful. What are we on? We got 2 more to go each, or is this my last?
So yeah, both yourself and Mike have 2 more.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put it. Well, let's think who I'm going to take out here. I think I've got to take out. I'm going to take out Cody, I'm afraid. I'm taking Cody out, and I'm going to put Chris Jericho in. I'm putting Jericho in. He's not somebody who had... I mean, again, it's like, are you somebody that likes a Ric Flair of crazy amount of reigns, or do you like someone like, Bruno Sammartino, who held the belt for so long? It's where do you value that in? Now, Chris Jericho, he had it multiple amount of times. Now, I don't really read as much into it. My value's more in the days held as opposed to that. So, given that he was a 9-time champion, he didn't really like the number of days wasn't that long. However, some of these matches were, I thought, excellent. I go back to the stuff he was doing with Kurt Angle at the time, Benoit, Eddie, were all centered around those matches. When he first came in, especially I think it was like WrestleMania 2000, he started off with that European Intercontinental match where it was like a couple of falls. It was kind of crazy how that worked. But yeah, I really dug him. And obviously, if you look at his arc and his time in WWE, I know that for the most part it's about the more bigger championships, but I personally think that he probably spent the majority of his best matches in that Intercontinental level and really elevated that title once again at a time that I was really disinterested in that belt. I thought it long gone for a long old time, and it was just being used more as a prop. But he every time he's had it, he's done some unique stuff with it. Obviously, in the end, I would say his last couple of reigns, should he have been back there? I don't know. Probably not the most famous of stuff. So it is a little bit of a hard one, but I think overall he deserves to be on the list for me. So yeah, Chris Jericho.
Good shout, really good shout. Mike, your thoughts on Chris Jericho? He does have the most amount of reigns, 9. Like I say, he's disassociated himself with WWE, now joining with AEW, of course. But yeah, he's still kind of up there. Like I say, not top for number of days combined, but still a very memorable Intercontinental champion, Mike.
Yeah, that's it. So he held the belt like many stages in his career.
Yeah.
Loads of memorable feuds, as John said. The one with China as well stands out, and obviously that Benoit Angle match at WrestleMania 2000 was great. One thing I noticed when I was looking about Jericho, I had him about 6th in my list, and I noticed that he'd helped a lot of young stars, and his matches with the IC title always meant something. If you look at the list of people he beat and who he then lost the title to, just reading it off, it's like Rey Mysterio, Jeff Hardy, Kofi Kingston. Then he won it off Edge, lost it to Shelton Benjamin. He beat RVD. He lost it to Kane. He beat Benoit and lost it to Triple H. He is integral to the story of the Intercontinental Championship, and that's why I had him so highly in my list. Even though his reigns are quite short, the 9 reigns have all been important for that title and the story that it's telling. So, Chris Jericho as a performer, excellent, always entertaining, great promo, very athletic in matches, back in the day especially, and great choice, John. Yeah, definitely somebody I would have said in my last couple of picks.
Very good. So, Mr. Angus, I think it's down to your 6th pick on your list.
I'm going to have to, at this stage, bring out the big guns as well. Let's think who shouldn't be in our top 10. Jonas, I'm really sorry about this, but Wade Barrett is still on the list, and I do not think he should be.
You've got bad news for me, Mike. You've got bad news for me.
I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you, Jonas. As great as Wade Barrett was, the Macho Man or the Macho King, Randy Savage, his one IC title run, which was 414 days long. At the time, he came in as the top free agent in pro wrestling. All the managers wanted him: Bobby Heenan, Jimmy Hart, Mr. Fuji, and then he came out with Miss Elizabeth as his manager. He won the title from Tito Santana, arguably one of the greatest IC champions in the Boston Garden in 1986. During his reign, he beat Bruno Sammartino, George the Animal Steele, and obviously then in 1987 he had Match of the Year at WrestleMania 3. Against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in what was a great feud. Yeah. And that part of Macho Man's career essentially is what built him up to that next level, where he then went on to become the champion and mega powers. And then, from there, obviously, John, as you've got the T-shirt on, Macho Man, what an absolute legend. Yeah. What a legend. And, in my list overall, he came second, factoring in all the different factors, putting it through the Steiner Maths number cruncher, and oh yeah,
oh yeah, dig it. Love it. Yeah, couldn't disagree with you there at all, Mike, to be honest with you. And I thought he was an excellent Intercontinental champion. I thought that the belt looked fabulous on him, to be honest with you. He just fitted the belt. The belt fitted him. It was a perfect combination. When he was the champion, it was all about him. And when you talk about workhorses, once again, he kind of epitomizes that that kind of combination of amazing wrestler. Go out there 300 days a year and defend the title, but he was a workhorse through and through, probably the best workhorse, and definitely deserves to be on the top 10 for sure. John, the Macho Man is Intercontinental champion. I don't think we can disagree, can we?
No, he was in my list 100%. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, WrestleMania 3, you can't say any more than that, really, can you? With Ricky Steamboat, tremendous matches that he had. But not only that, I think in that period of time, he was you could definitely see star power there already. Even when he was at that level, he wasn't somebody, I don't think, that had to prove it. I think he already was. I just think it's that Hogan was the man, and you couldn't get past that if he was a face. So obviously they'd done the next best thing there, and they ended up turning macho. But yeah, I mean, he was a master in the ring. Obviously, people that understand Nari, he was very picky about how he put his matches together. You know, he was very, very detailed. Liked to go through every single step and lay out that match. I think Ricky Steamboat, on many interviews, has said that he would literally write everything down, spot for
Move for
spot,
move,
move
yeah.
for move. So he wasn't somebody who, you hear it a lot of times, and people say, oh, they don't do it like they used to, where they listen to the crowd and they gauge into it. But, Randy Savage never did either. And, you look at how those matches went. He obviously had a very good vision to see what fans were going to want and expect, because you can't always do that, because we see it a lot in modern day where they'll go out and have a match and you think, oh, they're not listening to the audience right now. They're doing it either too quick or there's no logic to it. But someone like Randy Savage obviously had the foresight to be able to put everything together so clinically, and that's why his matches paid off. But so, you think of somebody putting that much into what he was doing and backed up with his ability, you've got magic there. So yeah, definitely a worthy person to add to the list.
So I think it's down to me for my 7th and final pick. First of all, let's see who I'm going to.
It's the hard one, mate.
Yeah, how heelish am I feeling right now? Let's have a look. The list. I mean, I'm just going to read off the list because you've got one pick each. You've obviously still got the Miz there, Honky Tonk Man, Chris Jericho, Macho Man, Mr. Perfect, Shawn Michaels, Pedro Morales, Edge, Razor Ramon, Bret Hart. It's shaping up to be a pretty awesome list. To be honest with you, the weakest one is probably mine. So I might have to I take one of mine off to put one of mine on.
It's got that bad, hasn't it?
It's got that bad. Bloody hell. Let's have a look.
Oh, dear.
Oh, God. I might have to. Oh, dear. I can't take off any of the others. Okay. Serious now.
He's going to turn heel. I think that's what we're going to see right now.
Turn heel on myself by the looks of it. Okay. I'm going to take off the Honky Tonk Man, the greatest Intercontinental champion of all time. In my opinion, more of a gimmick than a wrestler. And yes, he was a fantastic heel, probably one of the best, if not the best heels in the business at the time. And he did draw money, and he was, like I say, a great character to have around. But he wasn't the workhorse that I believe in that should be an Intercontinental champion. So the Honky Tonk Man has gone, and I'm going to replace him with 5-time Intercontinental champion Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And I believe that the Intercontinental champion was the belt that first legitimized Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley back in the mid-90s. And of course, kind of he had that funny aristocrat gimmick that people couldn't really take seriously. He had that feud with Henry Godwin, the pig pen match, the hog pen match, and having all sorts of slop tipped over him. But then when he started getting involved in the IC title feuds, that's when he started to be a bit more legitimate. Of course, he paired up with Shawn Michaels as the original DX, of course. I still remember that tremendous ladder match between him and The Rock at SummerSlam for the Intercontinental title. And he feuded with the likes of Mark Merrow, The Rock, and so many others, over the IC title. But I think that was kind of the launching pad. That was the first stepping stone for Triple H as a legitimate wrestler, as a legitimate threat. Of course, he had that whole curtain call thing at MSG when the rest of them went to WCW, and he was punished for a good year. He should have won the King of the Ring the year that Stone Cold won it, but everything was put on ice for a year. And then from 97 onwards, that was his kind of launching pad. And I think the IC title was a big start of that. You look at it now. He's married to the owner's daughter, so that's where the IC title started as a first stepping stone. But in all seriousness, he's one of the greatest world champions of all time, and one of the greatest names, one of the greatest wrestlers in the business from top to bottom. And I think the IC title was a big part of his history and a big part of that picture. So Triple H is going in instead of the Honky Tonk Man. So a good replacement, I would say.
Well, you would. I won't.
Go on then, John. Well, you're obviously not happy because I took the honky tonk
But
man
no,
out.
but I mean Triple H. No, I agree. Triple H. I have no problems with him being on the list. To be quite honest, I think you're right. I really liked his whole Hunter Hearst Helmsley stuff. I mean, like I think he never gets mentioned now because he probably doesn't want people to go and look that up too much compared to his whole game stuff and everything he done after that. But you know. At the time, you know, he was having some great matches with guys like Goldust, as I recall. You know, I remember that stuff he was doing, Mark Mero as well, and Rocky Maivia, of course. And then he had this sort of time where The Rock had come in and he kind of like, he sort of leapfrogged Triple H to the title. And Triple H had another sort of round of Intercontinental reigns at that time where he sort of became quite a big baby face and he was sort of just sort of molding into what we would kind of see eventually in his kind of big title reign. So, yeah, he definitely needs to be there. I think he's not as appreciated probably as an Intercontinental champion as probably what he should be. Of course, the match I think as well with The Rock. Can't remember what SummerSlam. I think it was '98. I think.
Yeah, that's
the ladder that was really good. So yeah, you know, I have no problems with him being in there. One of the unseen heroes, I think.
Mike.
Well, overall, Triple H is my all-time favorite wrestler. So I really appreciated and admired his work, sort of when he was doing the Ric Flair sort of style heel stuff back in 2003, because he had sort of taken from the best, watched everything and learned from it. It became the game, and you know he was cerebral about it. He knew the history of wrestling, and he was using it to his advantage, which was why I thought he was such a great character. He set up Evolution and all that sort of stuff. But back in the day, when I used to watch Wrestling Challenge on a Sunday afternoon at my nan and granddad's, Triple H was coming through us Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and the promos he did, you know, as a kid, I must have been 11 when he was coming through, and I remember watching them every week and just thinking, "Who is this guy?" You know, I hate him. You know, you know. So he did what he set out to do. He was a great character, and he was a workhorse. I remember matches with Owen Hart, and there was the one where Chyna was handcuffed to Sergeant Slaughter, and all them little bits, and leading into DX. Yeah, you can't deny that Triple H was brilliant. He didn't make my Intercontinental title list, interestingly, but there's other people who didn't, you know, and you know, so I can appreciate the reason why he's on there. Yeah, and he's a great wrestler, so yeah, good choice.
So John, your final pick, sir.
Well, it's going to be hard because I've got two guys that I've got to pick from. I think I'll have to go, but I don't know which one.
Crunch time.
Crunch time is on here, and then it's also very difficult who I'm putting in because my list is pretty bare now. I have to say that it's just, you know, I've not done your tactics here, John. I've played my best hands, I would say, at this point. So I think this is going to come from the heart in this next pick, but I'm going to take out Edge. As controversial as that might be, obviously what I said earlier about, you know, I'd never dug him personally in that time, so it was a toss up between him and the Miz, but I just think the Miz gets it for me in that division because he's had so many recreations of himself in that mold. But the one I'm putting in now, this is probably out of left field, I'm sure, for a lot of people, because he's only had one reigns as the champion. He's also only held it for less than 150 days. So he's one of the weakest ones that I'm putting in at the end. But when I think back to when I was a kid, who stands out to me as the ultimate sort of Intercontinental champion, almost the perfect villain, who I really don't think gets too much appreciation anyway. So I'm putting him in. My final one is none other than Rick Rude is going in right at the end. For me, although it was a short run and only one time run, that feud we mentioned earlier with the Warrior, you know, he was absolutely fantastic at playing that heel role. I can't work out why WWF didn't sort of push him on to that next level. Because he really had everything, had all the fundamentals. He had the character. I mean, who can forget? Of course, the tights. You know, he'd have guys' images on it. I know the stuff he'd done with Jake Roberts was phenomenal. Yeah. You know, he had these like the wife planted on there and Roberts and all the rest of it. So, it's really innovative at the time. And he's somebody that, again, he doesn't get appreciated, I don't think, as loved as maybe what he should do. But for me, when I go back and think of an Intercontinental champion, I find him in the more sort of golden era as the sort of most legitimate guy I can come up with. So I'm giving it to Rick Rude. He's going in there, my last pick.
Good shout. And I was a huge fan of Rick Rude, and always wondered why, and I was always disappointed why he was never elevated to that next level. And it took him having to go to the rival organization for that to happen in his feud with Sting. And he did have an opportunity for the world title at SummerSlam 90 against Warrior in that cage, but that was pretty much the last time we saw Rick Rude in the WWF until he came back as a manager, as an advisor to the original DX. But that early incarnation of Rick Rude and that feud with Warrior over the Intercontinental title through 88, 89, absolutely fantastic. You can't get any better character or gimmick. Somebody that really, really believed in their abilities as a kind of a promo guy, and he was pretty good in the ring as well. Another one of these kind of all-rounders that we talk about. And I'm surprised that it was such a short reign as well, to be honest with you, because he strikes you as being one of them workhorse type wrestlers that would hold on to a title for much longer. But a solid name, and I think he does deserve to be in the top 10. Mike, your thoughts on Rick Rude?
Yeah, great. Brilliant physique, and from what I've read, one of the strongest wrestlers about. Did his arm wrestling, and everyone speaks very highly of him. He was a good friend of Mr. Perfect. Had Bobby Heenan as the manager. I'll always remember there was one match where Bobby Heenan, I think it was against Ultimate Warrior, Rick Rude, where Bobby Heenan was holding his feet as he made the count. And I think Rick Rude, great promo, great character, and very underrated. Yeah, I remember watching WCW on a Saturday afternoon here in the UK. That was probably, I'm guessing, 92, 93 sort of time. And Rick Rude then, he had his hair cut short, and he was feuding for like the title with Sting in that sort of time period. And he looked like a professional wrestler. And I think a great character, great story, and just a shame that more wasn't done with him in the business, I think. So but still stands out as a great guy, and someone who can definitely be. He was around 11th, 12th in my original list, so very good. Someone who can definitely slot in there. Yeah.
So, Mike, it falls to you to have that final pick, your seventh pick. Who are you taking off the list so far? Because the list is looking very, very solid. Who are you taking off, and who are you replacing him with?
That's it. Well, it's come down to me. We thought it'd be, I could come in and sneak some in, but I think everybody who had in my initial list that we've mentioned now have either been in or taken out. So it leaves me to look for somebody who may not have been my first choice. But then I'm looking at the list we've got. So we've got Mr. Perfect, Macho Man, Jericho, HBK, Bret, Triple H, Razor Ramon, Miz, Rick Rude, and Pedro Morales. Is that right?
That's what I've got. Yeah.
Yep. That's the 10 we've got at the moment. And it's tough to debate that any of them should really come out, to be honest. There's people we haven't mentioned. We haven't mentioned, the British Bull. We've mentioned British Bulldog, but not in the capacity of putting him in. Unfortunately, he just had the one title reign. Although it was super memorable, I don't think it can warrant him taking the place of anybody who's in there. Other honourable mentions that have to go to RVD, who's one of my favourite wrestlers. He's held it 6 times with 211 days in total. Stone Cold, Ric Flair, Owen Hart arguably had one of the best moments of his career with the IC title. But there's only one guy I could see who could actually go into this list, and it's wherever there's only one who can come out. Oh, a tough one.
You put him right in it now.
If I was going to take anybody out, it'd be Pedro Morales. Just for the reason being that he was an absolute foundation for the Intercontinental title, but he wasn't as involved in the time periods when I was watching it. But it's close. Do I have to switch somebody? Do I have to put someone in now? What are we saying?
Yeah. There's only 10 places.
If I was made to do it, you got to do
it. All right, because this could be quite controversial. It's between two people, so so I would have to take out Pedro Morales then, just because although he was a trailblazer and the foundation of the Intercontinental Championship, there's people who've been more involved later on. The only person I could think that could go in is sort of from the In Your House era, who's held the belt 6 times for a total of 298 days, and not necessarily a popular character, but Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett. So he had feuds with Razor Ramon. He obviously had the match with China, and during that he had the story with the roadie, with My Baby Tonight, and yeah, he's the only other person out of the list who I think could sneak into our top 10, and it's a close call, but just because he was more relevant when I was watching would be my reason for that. So yes, but I think between us all, we've definitely covered the top 15 sort of Intercontinental Championship talents, and I think the list we've come up with is pretty good, to be fair.
Yeah, well, I had Jeff Jarrett in my list. Like I say, 6-time tag team, 6-time Intercontinental champion. I've got 298 combined days here, but it was a good. I think the IC title in Jeff Jarrett was a good fit, to be honest with you. He was that kind of more smaller, more athletic guy in the same sort of vein as maybe a Shawn Michaels and a Bret Hart, to be honest with you. Had some good feuds with the likes of Razor Ramon and China and D'Lo Brown and one or two others. But yeah, I had him on my list, and certainly not one of my more popular wrestlers. And to be honest with you, I actually don't think he was that good of a wrestler. Might have been more of a better gimmick than he was an actual performer. But I can certainly see why he's in the top 10, and I think with the number of reigns, when you look at 6 title reigns, he's definitely kind of up there and deserves to be in the final 10. But what about yourself, John?
I actually did have Jeff Jarrett on my list, but I went with Rick Rude in the end. I'm glad Jeff's in there because I actually I was not a fan of his stuff when he was doing the stuff with Jesse James and that bloody song spin. I wasn't into that, the long hair and that bloody attire. What the hell was that? But I couldn't stand it. But where I really started to get into Jeff Jarrett is in the Attitude Era, where he took on the whole thing with Deborah, and he'd obviously he'd obviously be doing a lot of cheating. But I'm actually probably not like yourself, John. I actually did see star power in him, and I thought he should have been elevated to a heel champion. And I know eventually when he got to WCW, they kind of done the whole TNA gig, I guess. When a guy comes in, you get the belt, and they did that with him probably a little bit too quick. But you could definitely tell that he could pull it off if WWF had have gone that. Obviously, there just wasn't the space at the time, but I think he was quite believable. And I was always disappointed that I never got to see him fight for a sort of major title in WWF at the time. I can't say I was a fan favorite of his, but I always thought there's something about this guy that I can see him going on after the Intercontinental stuff. The stuff that sticks out to me is WrestleMania, I think it's 15, where they was doing this ridiculous angle with Goldust and the Blue Meanie at the time, and we had Ken Shamrock's supposedly sister, being involved, and she was kind of like going around to all the guys at the same time, with involved. You didn't know what she was up to, but yeah, I enjoyed all of that stuff that he done. So yeah, definitely glad he's in there because he was on my list. So quite happy with that.
Very good, very good. So there we have it. We've all put down our 7 choices. We've kind of knocked various picks out of the top 10. We've got our final top 10. So let's go through it. I think it's a staggeringly good list, to be honest with you. In no particular order. We've got the Miz, of course, Triple H, Chris Jericho, the Macho Man, Mr. Perfect, Shawn Michaels, Jeff Jarrett, Rick Rude, Razor Ramon, and Bret Hart. I think that's a pretty solid list. And out of all of those, Mike had 4 picks, John had 4 picks, and I had 2 because I think my tactics backfired on me. I went with too many weak links to start off with. But that was really good fun, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And like I say, I think we kind of had some really good conversation about some terrific wrestlers over the years, really brought back some fantastic memories, and especially of a bout that doesn't get spoken about enough, in my opinion. And like John said at the top of the podcast, the Intercontinental title, its kind of prestige and its kind of standing has lost a lot of its shine over the years, where it was always a workhorse title, and nowadays it's just another one of many, and probably another one of too many championships in WWE and wrestling in general, and that prestige has gone somewhat. But Mike, what are your thoughts on our top 10 there?
Yeah, great. I think we came up with 10 brilliant superstars, lots of memories for people. A quote I've got written down here is that the Intercontinental Champion is one worker who is head and shoulders above the rest. And I think if you look at the list of people we've got in the top 10, at some time they are the workhorse, they are the technical wrestler, they're showmen, but they're athletes, and they are all characters that we remember. And, I think it's a great list we've compiled, and I'd like to just thank you guys so much for having me on today. And, it's been great chatting to you, and it's great to see that we do have some similar opinions as well, which is good. Sorry about some of yours, Jonas, that got knocked out earlier, but
I should be the one that's apologised.
We might not get invited on again now.
But I want to thank
more
you.
Yes people next time, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for kind of the preparation and the work you put into this. But John, a very, very solid top 10, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few honourable mentions, as Mike did earlier. I had Ricky Steamboat. Now, obviously, he wasn't, although he's definitely up there in terms of one of the greatest matches. And, it's hard not to have put him in, because, that match, that is one of the test of times. I mean, everyone goes back to that and says about the Intercontinental match, and it's the one he won, obviously. So, it was hard not to put him in there. But then if you look at his reign and what he'd done afterwards, it wasn't, overly fantastic. But for that one night, it definitely did put the belt on a bit of a tier, because although we had Andre and Hogan that night, the match that I think people thought was the best match was no doubt about it, was that one. Other people, like Mike alluded to, was Owen Hart. I had Goldust as well, who I thought was a pretty decent champion. Benoit. Who else did I have down? Pat Patterson. I was almost going to put him in. Getting one of the old school guys in there, even though it was the most ridiculous setup at the beginning, I was going to put him in, because listen, there is only one guy who ever gets it first, and it happened to be Pat Patterson. So, honourable mention there for me. But yeah, I think overall it's a solid list. I think too many people can argue. I'm disappointed Honky didn't last. That's my biggest disappointment. That's it.
There we go. Well, John and Mike, I want to thank you so much for being part of this very, very special 2-year anniversary podcast and episode 162. And both of you have been a big part of the Wrestling with John's podcast over the last year or two. So I want to thank you for all of your contribution, your support, your friendship. And we're going to have to do this many more times. And with John, we're going to see each other every Thursday to do NXT UK Weekly, of course. And that's going from strength to strength, and all the stuff that you and the guys are doing over at Powered 4. But from myself, Johners, and from Mike Angus and John Scott, thank you very much.